We now end these lectures on the Central Dogma by covering translation.
I'm going to quickly cover translation because you have had this before in your biology classes. Translation has a much more interesting problem than transcription. Transcription is a relatively simple problem, converting a DNA sequence to RNA sequence. But in translation, you are changing from one language, that of nucleic acids, to another, proteins. To do this, you need a few components. A translation code, an adapter that recognizes both nucleotides and amino acids, and a machine that can make the peptide bonds. Translation is the most conserved process in biology. Therefore, you can use it as a definition of life, at least on this planet. If a self-replicating system can translate its proteins, it is alive. Translation is so named because you are translating the recipes in nucleic acids into a new language, proteins.
Let's look at an animation of the process. If you click on the animation here, it's just going to show you the general process, and then we'll go through specifics in the next few slides. Initiation factors bind. The mRNA comes in and interacts with the 16S ribosomal RNA. The 50S ribosome binds. The first initiator FMET tRNA binds, and then you get more tRNAs afterward. The process continues. You get to near the end of the protein. The stop codon comes up, the release factor comes in, and you release the protein. Let's go through some specifics. Before we begin, a few points to remember. The key to translation is the genetic code in which base pair triplets signify what bases code for which amino acids. So why 3 bases per codon? Well, you are translating a 4-letter language, that of bases, into a 20-letter language, amino acids. If you just use one base, that would be 4 to the power of 1, you could only delineate 4 items. If you use 2 bases, that would be 4 to the power of 2, you could code for 16 items. If you use 3 bases, which is 4 to the power of 3, you can code for 64 different things. So, all 20 amino acids and also stop codons. The table shows the genetic code as triplets. This code was worked out very early in biology and is universal across all organisms with just a few exceptions. Because there are 64 possible codons, there is redundancy. And if you look carefully, you will notice that this redundancy has a design to it. If you change the 3rd base of the codon, it often encodes the same amino acid. These wobble rules are rooted in the chemical interaction of the tRNA with the mRNA. Thus, in many cases, changing the 3rd base of a codon does not change the amino acid, and this prevents mutations. In addition, changing the 2nd or even the 1st base of a codon, while it will frequently result in a different amino acid, sometimes results in the insertion of a chemically similar amino acid. For example, if the C in CTT is changed to an A to form ATT, the amino acid changes from leucine to isoleucine. These 2 amino acids have very similar chemistry, and the protein would probably still be functional. Key to translation. The actual translation occurs when the tRNA synthetase charges the tRNA. The translation does not occur on the ribosome because it's already happened. These synthetases are the ones that sense the structure of the tRNA and charge the amino acid that matches the anticodon on the tRNA. Here is where you're actually translating from nucleic acid to amino acid, nucleic acid to protein. This process is critical. These enzymes must charge the tRNA with the correct amino acid at the right time and in the right amount. The cell does not want too much tRNA charge because that's wasteful, and too little would slow down protein synthesis. Also notice this process requires a lot of energy, 1 ATP per tRNA charged. And this ATP is reduced to AMP, so it's actually costing you 2 phosphate bonds. Okay, let's go through the translation process very quickly. Initiation. The translation process begins with the 30S subunit combining with the mRNA and initiation factors. The mRNA lines up its Shine-Delgarno sequence with a complementary sequence in the 16S ribosomal RNA. This alignment sets up the reading frame, and FMET tRNA now binds to a nearby AUG. Next, the 50S subunit adds, and a second tRNA enters the A site with the help of elongation factor. We now move on to elongation. A peptide bond forms between the FMET tRNA and the next tRNA, asparagine here. The ribosome advances by moving the peptidyl tRNA to the P site, and the empty initiator tRNA goes to the E site and then fuses away. A charged tRNA settles into the newly opened A site, and a second peptide bond forms. The process uses more elongation factors, and the ribosome hydrolyzes GTP during each translocation step. Translation continues until the ribosome eventually reaches a stop codon. At that time, the ribosome pauses, and the release factor, RF, enters to remove the protein from the ribosome. Prokaryotes link transcription and translation to speed up the process. Their ability to react quickly to changing environmental conditions is essential, so anytime they can save is valuable, and linking these two processes together does save time. Coupling transcription and translation also allows for unique ways to regulate the process, which we will discuss later in the semester. However, this coupling can create problems. If you look at the figure, if there is a severe mutation called a frameshift mutation, as one example, it can cause the premature termination of a protein. But this also creates a long stretch of open DNA, and often the Rho protein will recognize this and terminate transcription as well. So therefore, not only, let's say, imagine there is a mutation in gene B that causes the peptide to be truncated. Because you have this open stretch of DNA after that truncation of the peptide, Rho will come in and it will pull out the transcript. And thus both C and D will also not be transcribed or translated. These types of mutations are called polar mutations, and they only occur in prokaryotes where transcription and translation are linked. You now have a product of translation, and this product of translation is a string of amino acids, but is not a protein yet. It needs to fold up correctly to carry out its function. Originally, scientists thought that protein folding was a spontaneous process, and you can get some proteins to fold correctly in the test tube all by themselves. Later on, we discovered molecular chaperones. These barrel-shaped proteins, and the example here is GRO-EL and GRO-ES, take a protein and help it to fold into its native conformation. They can rescue improperly folded proteins, and they also speed up the process of protein folding. Even after a protein is folded, it may require a cofactor or association with other proteins to form a multimer. All of these processes occur after a protein is translated. Okay, now let's look at some differences in translation between eukaryotes and prokaryotes. As we hinted at earlier, the process is different for eukaryotes. First, the mRNA has a 5' cap and a poly A tail added. These modifications stabilize the mRNA. Second, because transcription happens in the nucleus and translation occurs in the cytoplasm, transcription and translation do not occur simultaneously. Finally, translation initiation is different. There is no Shine-Dalgarno sequence. Translation begins from the first AUG in the mRNA, and methionine is added, not formal methionine. Here's a summary of much of the information we just talked about. You may find this chart a useful study aid. Okay, so that's the classic presentation of transcription and translation. But before we leave this topic, I wanted to talk to you about some really interesting exceptions and to give you a more rich picture of some of the crazy stuff that goes on in cells. What I'm demonstrating here is, once again, that biological systems always have exceptions, and translation has some amazing ones. First of all, there are surprising initiation sites. Not all translation initiation sites have an AUG as the first codon. About 10% of the starts in E. coli use either GUG or UUG, though they still insert FMET at those codons. The initiator tRNA can read these codons fairly well, as genes beginning with these codons are translated. Rather amazingly, the Shine-Dalgarno sequence is not even necessary for translation. A few mRNAs exist where the first nucleotide is the A of the start codon, so there is no Shine-Dalgarno sequence on the 5' side of the start codon. Yet the ribosome translates these messenger RNAs. The explanation for the paradox seems to be that translation can initiate if there's a good Shine-Dalgarno sequence or no sequence, but initiation is prevented when there is an inappropriate sequence 5' of the start codon. There are genes for which translation initiates at either of two different start codons, though there are always at different positions in the same reading frame. The result is that one gets two protein products that differ only at the N-terminus. These two protein products are not an accident, but rather because the cell has deliberately developed a way to use these similar but non-identical proteins differently. In a sense, the cell produces two proteins from a single gene. There's also some surprising elongation. While ribosomes really do read one codon after another and typically stick to the reading frame they initiate in, there are exceptions. Scientists have found several cases where at very particular sequences, the ribosome and the bound tRNA with a nascent polypeptide slide a base or two one way or the other. This sliding now puts a different codon in the open position. The tRNA for that codon then comes in and translation continues in a new reading frame. As with different initiation sites, this shift is not a careless mistake, but occurs at very specific sites. So that using the new reading frame is necessary for making the normal protein. How does this ribosome know, okay, I'm supposed to slide here, but nowhere else in the genome? It's amazing. Here's some more interesting exceptions. The 21st and 22nd amino acids. The genetic code has signals for 20 amino acids, but some proteins have other amino acids in them, with selenocysteine being one of the more common. This amino acid was assumed to be added to proteins by some post-translational modification of cysteine to selenocysteine, and such modification is typical for other unusual amino acids. However, in at least some cases, selenocysteine is charged onto a unique tRNA and inserted at a UGA codon. As with the frame shifting in the previous slide, this only occurs at very specific and appropriate UGA codons. Remember, most UGA codons really should be recognized as termination codons. In fact, the sequences around the UGA, the context, tell the cell that this particular UGA should be translated as selenocysteine, as not used as a stop signal. Some examples of proteins that have this selenocysteine are mammalian thioredoxin reductase, which functions in cell proliferation, antioxidant removal, and in signaling cascades. Anaerobic bacteria have also been found to contain proteins with selenocysteine. While not as well understood, another amino acid called pyrrolysine seems to be put into proteins in a roughly similar manner. In this case, a different stop codon, UAG, is used as the signal. This situation has been found in archaea and might also be present in some gram-positive bacteria. Surprising translation termination. There are also cases where a translation stop site is not very efficient, such that termination only occurs a fraction of the time. This is presumably because the nucleotide contact around the codon does not interact efficiently with the release factor. When translation continues, the stop codon is read by a tRNA whose anticodon normally reads a codon similar to UGA, such as UGG of tryptophan or the UCG of serine. Eventually, the ribosome comes to another stop codon where termination is efficient. The result is that the ribosome makes two different proteins from the same region that differs at the C-terminal end. Again, this is not an accident, but a deliberate tool of the cell to create similar but non-identical protein products. I will leave you with one final amazing factoid that you can use to impress people at parties. Translation involves many errors. The ribosome makes a mistake inserting the wrong amino acid into the peptide about 1 in 1,000 times. The average size of a bacterial protein is 333 amino acids. That means 1 in 3 proteins produced has a wrong amino acid somewhere. Given this fact, I find it amazing that biology works at all. All right, that is the end of our lectures on the Central Dogma.